you feel as if you don't belong? Do you know you were meant for something more? Well, you were. Knowledge of who you are and where you really are from is within your reach. Join Janet Carol and Dr. Sasha Lesson as they search for the answers as they open up the Stargate to the cosmos.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to Stargate to the Cosmos. I'm your host, Janet Carol Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lesson, and our producer, Deborah DeFranco, also is a co-host. And our guest today is Suzanne Laura Thistle, and I want to tell you a little bit about her before we bring her on. So Suzanne began her recovery journey in 1987, which led her to become a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. Her professional addiction experience spans over 20 years, and she currently teaches about substance use and misuse at a local university. Her roles have included executive and clinical directors of 2 agencies, manager, as well as a therapist. While serving in these positions, she received the Legislative Advocacy Award for Addiction Professionals and the Treatment Agency of the Year Award, both from her peers. So she enjoys being with family, traveling, hiking, and relaxing on Newfoundland Lake. Let me see if there's anything else I want to know. She wrote a book. Her book is called Chem-Free Sobriety. I'm going to bring her on, and she'll tell us all about her book, so I'm not going to read that for you. Better letting her tell us. And before we bring on Suzanne, I want to bring on both Sasha and Deborah to do a little sound check. So, Sasha, aloha. Hi, sweetheart.
Aloha. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you see anything? I mean, say anything about the topic.
Suzanne, I used to be director of counseling for the Waikiki Drug Clinic, and so I'm really into the work, and I'm really eager to hear what you got to say.
Great. Okay, try to get down your mic just a little bit, and then Deborah, sound check with you.
I'm good. Can you hear me? Aloha, everybody.
You're perfect. Yes. Sasha has a little bit of, you might want to kind of slow down before you talk because you get feedback, but it should be okay. All right, so now Suzanne, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to virtually meet you all. I probably should start with why I wrote the book. I've been in the profession a really long time and helped a lot of people with a lot of folks helping me help them. And it got, when the opiate epidemic surfaced, we felt helpless. We couldn't help all the people that needed help. There was no place for them to go. It was really a disaster. In New Hampshire, many years ago, we had 600 beds, and then insurance came along, and I believe what happened is they didn't want to pay for residential care. And so they said, you need to go an outpatient. And when that happened, we went down to 100 beds in New Hampshire anyways. And so when this opiate epidemic hit, we had no place to send anybody. And the place that I was the executive director of, the last place I was at, we couldn't send them anywhere. They were coming in and, I remember sitting late one night. I think it was a Sunday night. We had, 3 people that were staying after because they, these 2 families and another person came in and they all needed residential care. And we knew at the time that we couldn't get them in. And we tried and we tried and we tried. And fortunately, New Hampshire has switched to a lot of folks getting Medicaid to cover substance use disorder services. It didn't in the past. And that's real new. Probably, I'm trying to remember when that was, maybe 8 years ago, somewhere around there. But before that, Medicaid didn't cover substance use disorder services. So people were doing the best they can to work with the system. But in any event, it was devastating. It was devastating to the staff. We all walked around like, what is going on? What are we going to do? People were dying all around us. And then some money started coming in, and we started to see a little bit of help. But at the same time, we started seeing more medication be distributed, and people were jumping on board because New Hampshire, I don't know if you know this, we were one of the top places in the country with the highest overdose death rates. I think Virginia was ahead of us. I don't know if we were second or third for a while there. And so money started coming in, and most of the money that came in was for medication-assisted treatment. And I still have not seen a drastic reduction in the death rate. I looked today, and I think last year was 400 and I can't remember what the amount is, but it was pretty high, 411 I think, or 411 for last year, and the year before was 470. Now though the overdose rate, death rate has gone down, we have a lot of Narcan being distributed. So we still have a huge problem. I can't be glad. I mean, I can be glad that the overdose death rate is down, and they knew they had to get Narcan out there to stop some of this. But unfortunately, fentanyl, which is now almost like a drug of choice for folks, it takes more than one shot of Narcan to get people to revive. It's a revival drug. They administer it, and it reverses the overdose. But anyway, so what I had seen and what I started to see right before I ventured out to write this book is lots of places coming into New Hampshire, setting up shop and providing medication. The Congress, that's a whole nother thing, but pharmaceuticals play a big role in Congress and what they decide. And so a lot of the money coming in went to medication-assisted treatment, and I'm still not seeing a difference. And at the end of my time at my last job, I started to see people coming in saying, I'm addicted to Suboxone. We would ask them, what's your drug of choice? Suboxone. Methadone, those folks, a lot of times we were seeing they were on it, they didn't come off. They're not being told that they have to come off. They come off when they're ready, is what the methadone clinics tell you. And so I was infuriated. I just saw so much money coming into our state and going to folks who don't even know about addiction. And the folks on the streets, the lower level folks, the people treating these folks were not getting the money, most of the money. Most of the money went to higher level management. And so I was just really frustrated. And I said, you know what? I know I'm not the only one out here that believes that medication is not the answer, that we've had heroin addiction forever and other opiate addiction. It's been around a long time, and we didn't have to medicate them. There's not, and I'm not against medication. It's just that we didn't have to medicate them, and they were able to stay sober, and most through a 12-step program. Not all. There's plenty of people that just stop and they use church, or they have a good family support. But anyways, I just something came over me, and I just said, that's it. I'm doing it. And I started calling folks and asked if I could interview them. And I knew that I didn't want a small section of the state. I wanted to go all over the state and set up interviews so that they couldn't say, well, that's just that area. So I took out that, and went all over the state and said, and so it kind of got word of mouth. Hey, do you need somebody? Okay, yeah. There was the northern part of New Hampshire is pretty isolated. It's very rural, and so it was hard to get someone up there. But they were like 98, 99. The two folks that I got up in the northern part of the state. Pittsburgh, New Hampshire is difficult, but I started calling the church. I was calling the town hall. You gotta have somebody. I stopped at the stores and finally was able to get folks up there. And it took me about a year, a little over a year to get all the interviews done, and because of traveling and this and that, and then having to type up all the interviews. But my main purpose was to let people know there is a natural way to recover. You don't have to use medication. Not to say that there aren't some folks it'll be very, very difficult for them to get and remain sober without it, and it can be used as a bridge. But if you read the book, you'll find there's 101 stories in there. I wanted a large impact. I didn't want it to just be a couple of people that I talked to. I didn't want it to be my story. I wanted it to make a major impact, so I made sure I did 101. I was going to do 100, and I said I like the number 101 better. So, but all of them talk about. I don't know if there's anybody in there that says, yeah, I think it's a good idea to be on medication for life. What's happening now is doctors are saying if you get sober and then you don't use for a while and then you pick up, you could die, and that's why you need to be on this medication. Well, what does that infer? That infers that, well, then you need to be on medication for life because you could never get sober, because if you do, and you're sober for a while and you go back out, you could die. Well, that can happen no matter what. If you use...
Why does that happen, Suzanne? Why does that happen? That you get off and then you go back on and then you die? What does that do to the body that you die?
They overdose.
You know what
they're not managing. I think if you talk to a medical doctor, they'll tell you probably something different than what I'm telling you. But what I know is that they tell them they're telling us that they misinterpret how much they're using, or their tolerance goes down. So
okay, cool.
So they use more than they intend. But there's people in my book that have used heroin, that have used fentanyl, that have overdosed, and the best thing that they ever did was just not use anything, So, and some of them that have used it, abused it. People were shooting it up. People are selling it. People are using other drugs while they're on it. It's definitely not the be all end all. And, again, I'm not against, one of the things I did, in my profession at one time was to set up 9 Suboxone clinics. So I'm pretty familiar with the drug, and methadone, very familiar with both drugs. And so again, I'm not against it. When I was, setting these up and working with the owner, the key was that they would come off it. It was only a bridge. It wasn't meant to be on, but what's happening now is everybody's on it. It's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. And so, and what has happened is the folks that are, using and abusing opiates and other drugs are afraid. They're afraid to stop. If they do stop, they could die. And so now we're in kind of a conundrum, right? Because we're saying, hey, it's okay to stop, And yes, if you do pick up, any of us could die. I could pick up today, and not that I plan on it, but if I pick up today, I could die. You know, if I walk down the street, I could die. But what happens when somebody's using this type of medication is it numbs their feelings, it numbs their thoughts. It makes it, you know, so if you want to be that way for the rest of your life, if that's the only way that you think you can survive, go for it, you know. But I have to say that there is another way, and it's completely drug-free. And there, you know, chronic pain's a whole nother ball of wax. I didn't take anybody in the book that had chronic pain because it's just a very difficult thing to deal with. I'm hoping, what I understand is addictive medication is kind of being held back, and the addictive medication is out there. So I just, you know, I can't really speak about that. It's just, it's difficult to deal with chronic pain. So the folks in my book, none of them had chronic pain. And the other thing that's happening too is marijuana. I couldn't, you know, I'm very involved with public policy, and I saw a bill go across my screen that they wanted to start alternative treatment centers. And I thought, well, that's great. Maybe there's faith-based, maybe there's, you know, equine, you know, other therapies that they're going to support. It was for marijuana treatment for substance use disorders. And it's just coming from where I came from, knowing what I know, and people will say, well, it's because you're sober and you're not using anything. No, it's not just because I'm sober and I'm not using anything. I've been around for a long, long time. I've read as much as I think I can possibly read. I'm sure there's a lot that I don't know, but I do know a lot from my experience personally and professionally. And you don't have to use anything. You can stop, work on yourself, and get better. And I'm carrying on here. I hope I'm not talking too much.
Oh, no, that's okay. Let's stop that, and we'll have a question or two. Okay. Dr. Lesson, my husband, Sasha, Dr. Lesson, was at the Waikiki Drug Clinic back in the, 60s and 70s in Hawaii. How does what you were doing correlate with what Suzanne's talking about? Or does it at all? Maybe there's no correlation.
I think that my model is to find the part of the person that can alleviate their anxiety with substances or behaviors, and to find out when they were vulnerable and they and what they adapted. And usually, many people start with say chocolate, and so instead and so forth. And so once we get to that what is happening is a person's vulnerability is being triggered by something which makes them want to defend in whatever way they can. And if what they do is a substance, then we have a whole bunch of different ways of approaching them. One of the best ones is to say that part of you is a great part. You know, the thing to do is to get addicted to something healthy like yoga, and this is Glasser's method. Glasser saw this guy running up and down San Vicente Drive and every day and saying the Lord's Prayer. And, why are you doing that? Are you having fun? No, I hate this, but this is because I don't want to drink anymore. Well, that's kind of but that's really it. If you can get to where a person realizes they're destabilized, and then in hypnosis we stall a little. We say, well, when you feel that need for your cigarette or whatever it is, that means pause and say, what was I thinking just before I wanted this cigarette? And for a lot of people, just dealing with that is all they really need to do. And then we say, then you have to get a drink of water before you take a puff, because that's part of the process of and so forth. We do a bunch of stalls. By the time we give them all these things to do, they've worked on the problem that they were trying to avoid anyway. So there's a number of ways, depending on how heavy it is with the person. But and as far as substances go, one of the most interesting things I found in hypnosis, applying Levitsky's hypothesis that anything that you've once experienced, you can recreate for yourself. So, I say, you have a toothache, you can give yourself an immediate Levocaine by just remembering how that felt when the Levocaine helped the place where it hurts. And so those are some things that I use, and it's a different kind of a methodology. My aim is not to have people identify themselves as addicts, but to identify themselves as a center, as a consciousness that has many aspects, one of which can use substances and behaviors to alleviate anxiety.
Beautiful. Yes, absolutely. When I was doing therapy for a long time, those are some of the things we definitely would use. And the next book I have coming out is about the first 90 days of sobriety, just because that's usually the time where they're most likely to relapse. But within the book, we talk about yoga and relaxation and a lot of the treatment options that you can have, a lot of the behavioral changes. And I like what you were saying about remembering, because that sounds really great to use for sure. Reading, taking yourself away from it, stop, think, am I hungry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. They say halt, that those, some of the times where I'd be, more likely to want to pick up stress, doing some stress management with them and, all of those things. Yeah.
In the more advanced form, what we find is that when somebody is taking offense at someone else, or they overly admire someone else, that's a sign that something's going on within them that they don't want to deal with. And so that's for in Jungian psychology, voice dialogue. That's the tip-off point. Oh boy, this is your chance to learn something about yourself and how you go into upset, and you can and upset other people around you. This is wonderful. You're being challenged.
Right. Carl Jung, you just talked about him. The 12 steps, if you've never read them, I remember somebody not too long ago said, everybody in the world should do this. The thing that I find so fascinating, Carl Jung was involved in setting up Alcoholics Anonymous, which a lot of things have come out of that. There's 12 steps all over the place. There's Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery. There's, a million different support groups out there now. But originally, the 12 steps were about, if you look at DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, and some of these other cognitive behavioral therapy, it's all in there. It's all in the 12 steps. It's all about changing those thoughts and behaviors that I had that made me, reach for something outside of myself to help me feel better. So, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
It's wonderful about AA is for people that don't know, these are two drunk guys who couldn't stay sober, but they helped each other, and that's how it all started. But that's the point. Sharing with other people is like what makes AA a wonderful organization and a social a support group for people that might totally lack that. And so it's like an incredible institution for saving people and giving them a chance in life.
Right. And we talk about, in the book, each story is different, but they all talk about what they used for support and what they used to get them and keep them from not using. And in there is, I wanted to make sure people had long-term sharing representatives who were listening to people speak at podiums, because everybody wanted to know about addiction. When this all hit, everybody was trying to learn everything they could, because most people kind of backed away from it. So it's kind of cool that you were doing that in the 60s. Because I remember my boss said to me when I first started doing therapy, she said, you know, most people don't like those people that you work with, and they don't like the people that work with them. And I'm like, what? Yeah. So they're not an easy crowd. I mean, you know, if you have diabetes, you know, you got to watch your sugar, and it's, you know, you don't, I mean, you do affect people by your anger if it's off or whatever, but, you know, addicts, alcoholics, I know you don't like those words, but that's what they call themselves. They lie, cheat, and steal. And so, I'm just thinking of, this one person said to me, an alcoholic will, steal from you, and an addict will steal from you and then help you try and find it. But
oh, that's wonderful.
Just reminded of that. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to love somebody with a substance use disorder, and it's hard to stop and stay stopped, and that's the key. That's what we want people to do: stop and stay stopped. And a lot of those answers are in Chem-Free Sobriety, which, by the way, you can get on Amazon. Do you guys get to order stuff from Amazon out there? I don't even know.
Oh,
yeah, we can order Amazon. Oh. Yeah.
Good.
That's how we have a life. Otherwise, you know, there's very few products.
I was in Maui in 1989. It's beautiful there.
Yeah.
Where I am now is similar, but it's not ocean. It's lake. We don't say aloha, which I like.
Aloha. We always say aloha. It's just it's natural for us. I wanted to ask you about your own journey with addiction, because I'm very curious. Like, how do people become addicted to, you know, drugs and alcohol and, you know, cigarettes and sugar? I mean, I went through my therapy and I discovered my sugar addiction, and I fight my sugar addiction as hard as some people do alcohol or tobacco or, you know, other drugs. So, for you, what was your journey with addiction? How did you get it? Was it something in your earlier life, childhood? Can you track it down to what you got addicted to first and what was happening?
Sure. So, my dad is an alcoholic. He has been sober 45 years, something like that. So I grew up with alcoholism in the home. My mother was a sweet, innocent young lady. They were both 16 when they got married. And we had this cute little house on Cape Cod, and life was wonderful. But when his drinking started to get out of control, all hell broke loose. And so I would assume that his destructive behavior and my mother's inability to kind of be supervised started me on that path. You know, things were chaotic, things were out of control, and he wound up leaving and moving up here to New Hampshire. And she was left with all 6 of us by herself, and he was drinking and trying to pay child support, you know. A couple of traumatic events, I won't go into them, happened because of their lack of supervision and paying attention. It didn't just happen to me. There were 6 of us. And so, when I was 12, I wound up moving up here to New Hampshire, and it was a good thing because my mother just really couldn't handle it. And who could? I don't know many women that could handle 6 kids, or a man that could handle 6 kids by themselves. And so I know that would be hard for me. I guess I should say that. And so I moved up here to New Hampshire, and I went from a school on the Cape that had 200 kids in 6th grade to a school in New Hampshire that had 12. And on the way to school on the bus, I'll never forget, we had to stop the bus because cows were crossing the road. And so I not only did a major change moving in with my father and my stepmother, he wound up getting married, but I also made a major cultural change. And I had sips of alcohol on the Cape. I started to abuse it a little bit. I remember the first time. The first time was there were a few of us that shared one beer, and so but I started to abuse it a little bit, and then when I came to New Hampshire, I just stopped because nobody drank. I mean, all these young farm kids weren't doing what I was doing. And then when I got into high school, though, I started, so it started with alcohol, and then pot started to come into play. And so I started smoking a little pot, and then I was smoking it almost every day. And I didn't drink as much because I felt like my parents would know. I did it on the weekends mostly. But near the end of high school, I was using on a regular basis. I was using whatever. I was smoking pot, I was drinking, I was doing drugs, whatever, I didn't like really hard drugs and I didn't like really hard alcohol, but I drank it, not as much as beer and wine and that sort of stuff. But so I was a full-fledged alcoholic by the time I was probably 16, 17. And so another thing that you'll see in this book is that if you read all the stories, you'll see a lot of us were in high school. And so I think more needs to be done for the kids in high school now. I know there's some prevention going on, but anyways, I think more can be done. And so I wound up leaving. I left high school 4 months before I graduated. All my friends that I went to high school with, I'm still friends with now, most of them, but I left them and went and graduated down on the Cape. I broke up with my boyfriend, so I had to go somewhere else. That's crazy. So I graduated on the Cape and wound up moving back up here and just partying, live to party. There's a saying, get dressed up to get messed up. And that's what I did. That's how I lived my life. And then one night I was really wasted and I was at a bar and wound up getting pregnant that night with somebody I didn't know, married him. 2 months later, my father said to me on the way to the wedding, he said, you don't have to marry him if you don't want to. And I thought, my grandmother is very Catholic, his mother. And I thought, I must have to marry him. And then, it was all about the party. We're going to get lots of gifts and we're going to have a great party. So we have to go through with this. I was, I don't know, how old was I? I was 23. I had my daughter when I was 24, so I was somewhere around 23 when I got married. And then when I had my daughter, I didn't want to be the mother that I was being. I always had wanted a child. I wanted to be a good mother, and I couldn't. And so I started to get involved in cocaine a lot, and the guilt and the shame, I couldn't get rid of it anymore. The shame and the guilt was so strong that nothing would wash it down, or no line, no toke, no drink would take care of it. So I was sitting in the Common in Plymouth, New Hampshire. I was sitting there, and all of a sudden a friend of mine came up to me, and she told me she was going to these meetings. And I said, oh, in my mind I was thinking, that's kind of embarrassing that she's doing that. So we started going to a 12-step meeting together, and she would get high and go. I would not. I'd be like, what's wrong with her? Because I felt at that point it had really hit my bottom, with this stuff. I didn't want to live the way I was living, and I didn't know how to live without it, So I started going with her, and I started to hear things that helped me, just to show up. I didn't have to know anything. I didn't have to think, because I was taking a lot of drugs and drinking a lot. And so to just stop, my brain and my body was, doing heavy withdrawals, which I didn't know that the excruciating anxiety that I was feeling had something to do with that. I just kept showing up because that's what I heard. So I kept showing up, and I would see people that I'd be like, wow, they're really happy. I want to be like them. And I heard, if you want what we have, do what we do. And so I started to do some of the things they were doing. I started to hang around people that were not drinking or using. And I started taking some of the suggestions, and I started to eat right, and I started to exercise. And I tried to go back, I was brought up Catholic, and I tried to, find a different church to go to, and then I went back to the Catholic Church for 20 years. After 6 months, I divorced the person that I had married, because it really was a match made in hell. My daughter's wonderful, though, and I have.
So you divorced before your daughter was born?
No, he and I were together 6 months, and I got divorced. And she was born, though, so she was about 6 months old. She must have been no, she was a year old. So we were married 6 months. I don't know how that all worked out, but she was born, and she was a year old when I got sober. So I'm trying to do the math here. I must have, do the math. What is the math? 6 months.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I was just doing the math, and it wasn't mathing for me, so that's why I was asking. But it's okay.
I got to change my story. But she was a year old. I remember that because I was 24 and she was a year old when I got sober. So we might have separated at 6 months, and the divorce was final after a year. That's probably what happened. Yeah. So, but anyways, I started to connect with people who were sober and not using any addictive medication or drugs, alcohol or other drugs, and they showed me the way. And I had worked the 12 steps. I started therapy. I was in therapy for 3 years the first time. And then I had different folks that were mentors to me. One woman who, early sobriety, she was 11 years sober, and she was in her 60s. She was a wonderful, wonderful woman. She worked with me. I sold timeshare for a while. She worked with me. And then and the secretariat where we worked was 3 years sober. So I was surrounded by people all the time that were sober. And my brother and my sister both got sober. I have a sister who's out in California, not far from you, who's been sober quite some time. I think 11 years. My brother got sober, but he's back out there. He was sober for 7 years. But anyways, I worked really hard on myself. And after a few years of after I did the therapy for 3 years, and I did it was a Hazelton thing where you answered all these questions, and he's still a therapist today, and I see him every once in a while because we're involved in the same kind of stuff. And I just think, wow, he must think, wow, this is amazing that she's still sober, and he was with me in the beginning. But after being sober for a while, I wound up getting married and had another child. My son, who's 29 now, he's never seen me drink, and he said to me one time, he said, Mom, you can just have one drink. And I'm thinking, oh my God, he has no idea.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, I was married to his father for 20 years, and we were in the Catholic Church for 20 years. And after I left the church, after we got divorced, because I just, felt like I didn't belong. I raised my kids, and they received all the sacraments. And when I left, I tried to go back, but I was like, oh, this is too weird. And then I realized that the folks that I connect with on a regular basis, I continue to go to a 12-step meeting on a regular basis, and this is my church, and I get involved in other spiritual activities that help keep me sober, and continue to. Most of my friends are sober. My husband, my new husband, I just got married again, and he has 18 years of sobriety, and we just got married in Bermuda in December, which was wonderful. Beautiful, beautiful wedding. Simple, very simple, but beautiful. And so my whole life is about, staying sober and helping others too. I just, when we talked earlier today and I didn't have service, that I was dropping off some recovery books at a guy's house who he has people in recovery staying with him, and he has support meetings at his house, and he's just kind of like a rehab, but on a very, very small scale. And he's been sober like 39 years. He's been sober a long time, and so it's like an underground tribe, and I guess part of why the book is so important is because people don't know. I mean, there was a recent study that just came out, and I just totally can't remember what it was, but who did it, but I think it came out in February, talking about 12-step meetings and how there's so many people that are staying sober a long time. There's studies out there, but it's hard to study because most of them are anonymous, right? So how do you study that unless you break their anonymity? So though some of the folks wanted to give their full name in the book, I didn't put anybody's full name. I figured, I can't have these people have their full name and then these people not have their full name. So I just didn't put anybody's full name. And then there were folks that they just want to help others and they don't want people to know who they are. So I did say that if somebody wanted to talk to some of these folks that they could, but all of anybody that's been given the gift of sobriety, most of them want to give it back. They want to give back, I think that goes for whatever it is you have, whether it's cancer or whatever. A lot of people want to give back and help other people to achieve what they have achieved, So I've been sober 33 years. That just is so weird. And had to go back to therapy. I went back to therapy because when I had my two small kids and I was married and I was a stay-at-home mom for a while before I went back to school, and I was helping my ex-husband with the books and raising two little kids and the president of the PTO, and we have the disease of more, right? More's better. So I've learned to back off a bit, but I wound up going back to therapy, and I remember her saying to me, asking me what's going on. I told her all this stuff, and then I said, I just need help with this, that, and the other thing. She goes, well, have you asked your husband to help you? I'm like, no, actually, I haven't. That's a good idea. So he started. Wow. Yeah, he started helping, and so, just life on life's terms, right? Learning how to live without, the way, I don't know, God intended, or the way that, is right for me and the people around me. So, boy, I've been going on and on. I hope I'm not talking too much. Just
let me stop here. I'm glad you. I wanted to give Deborah a chance to, ask a question or feedback, or maybe she wants to share her journey with whatever substances have been in her life. Deborah, what would you like to say? No pressure, no pressure.
I've never had a substance abuse problem because I'm one of those people that doesn't physically like to be out of control. Doesn't mean I haven't used, but it never became a problem. The one comment I did want to make from a personal experience, and I'm interested in Susan's opinion on that. Here in New York State, for addiction, they try to push you into clinics, right? Rehab programs that are clinically based. And my personal experience from it is they're putting Band-Aid on the issue. You know what I mean? They're treating the addiction, to me, which I feel like is often a symptom of something, of psychological issues that are much deeper, right? Mm-hmm. And they never get to those. And it just seems like these clinics are there to just churn insurance money and not really help the patients. Or is that just my imagination?
Oh, you're so right, Deborah. Is it Deborah?
Yes, ma'am.
Deborah.
Yeah. Insurance doesn't want to pay for this treatment. And what we've done in New Hampshire is really push hard to try and get longer treatment. I mean, the clients will tell you, I know when I was running a 38-day, 3-month, transitional living program, similar to rehab, but on a lighter scale. They've already worked on the, detox and that. We met with one of the senators and in a group, and they said 3 months is not enough. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, we just finally get some of these folks up on their feet and help them get their license or their Medicaid or, clothes, a job, just starting to, now they need to live in sober living. So we're starting to see some of that money go towards that. In the back of the book, there's a section for representatives, lawmakers, advocacy stuff. And you'll find that some of those folks are talking about, sober living and longer treatment, So yeah, definitely. You're seeing it because it's there, Deborah.
New York State actually has what's called mental health court, which I think is really, really good because it often forces a lot of people with addiction issues to get additional treatment, right? Yeah. And if you don't have insurance, they make you get on Medicaid or Medicare so that you do have some kind of financial support to seek out the treatment. And the way they run mental health court, it's not like your typical court. It's very supportive. You get appointed a counselor who sees you through your whole case. If you fall off the wagon, which isn't unusual because most people that end up in mental health court have addiction issues, right? And they require you to go to all your doctor's appointments. Your team in mental health court decides what kind of treatment you need because they put you through an analysis, and they decide the type of doctors and course of treatment that you need, and they all work together, including your court-assigned coordinator. And when you make mistakes, there's not harsh punishment, but they will escalate the punishment until you fully engage. And you often see people who have mental health issues and addiction issues, they do this stuff because they have to, they don't want to, and they don't engage. And if they don't engage, they're not going to get better, period. And the judge constantly imposes that on them. But I feel like other states need to look at what New York State is doing because New York State has lowered the recidivism rate through the mental health court program. And they wrote a special law to establish this court program. And I think it's very, very important, and I think it could be a model for others to take a look at.
We do have mental health court here in New Hampshire. We also have drug court, which if you have, I guess they're using minor crimes too, but it used to be felony. If you have a felony, you can choose to serve your time, or if your crime was related to substance use disorder stuff was involved, then you could do the same thing. You could you could do drug court instead of going to prison. Means keeps you out of the prison system. but you're highly monitored, and you have to, if you have mental health issues, you have to take care of that. You have to get substance use disorder treatment, whether it be rehab or whatever. So it's similar. But we do have mental health court separate. So if you just have a mental health issue and you don't have the substance use disorder, you can do mental health court instead.
Yeah, we've got the drug court and the mental health court here too. Have you found it to be effective in New Hampshire?
Yeah, I think it is effective. I would like to see less people in jail and prison and more people in treatment. But hopefully that'll happen. But especially, I think it works well with the felonies, because if that's what's, the underlying cause of why they're committing the crimes or why they're, whatever the mental health issue is, if it's bipolar and they're, spending money they don't have and racking up, legal bills that way, then they're able to get the treatment they need. And they see that. I think we are learning that, leaning more towards taking care of the problem, taking care of the root issue. But we've got a long way to go. We have a long way to go.
They're taking the baby.
Sasha, you still with?
Yeah.
I just wanted to give Sasha a chance to chime in before we go to the break. Are you there, babe?
I thought that one of the really useful ways of doing in-depth therapy, and I've done it myself with my sister too, that we used to send people to Sierra Tucson, where the idea is everybody in the family anybody that cared about the primary person that's referred to gets their own therapy and their own therapist, and they see them separately. Then they come together as a family and they discuss the same events. And it's amazing what you learn and how about the family system and how that works. And when I did that with my sister, it was totally amazing, because we both, witnessing the same events, had such different takes on them. It was so that's something I find is really useful, to get together with the people who are really your siblings, other people that care about you, and discuss in great depth with your own support team there to take your perspective, whatever it is, and make sure you're okay too. So it's not just that there's the victim and all the perps and the people that didn't save the victim from the perp. But it's everybody's a system, and they get to understand it. So I find that approach to alcoholism really powerful.
Absolutely a must. Absolutely. Yep. That's a great input there, Sasha, because one of the treatment centers I worked at, we didn't see anybody unless we saw their family member. We always included the family, and that was like policy. So, yeah, definitely important.
In my family, there was a huge reaction. My father's generation reacted to their uncle, who was an alcoholic. So all of the boys, 6 boys, they were so against any kind of drug or alcohol abuse. So they were in rebellion against this uncle that was horrendous. So that was interesting how that affected that entire generation. Mm. And it seems to have filtered down, because I never did any. I mean, I experimented because the kids in my neighborhood were doing it, but I saw some of them get addicted to whatever it was, tobacco or alcohol or whatever. And but I took some initial puffs or drinks with them, but I just didn't like it. I'm like Deborah. I didn't like being out of control, so I never went down that road. But I'm looking back, like why didn't I end up like one of my best friends? She was dead by the time she was 41. She had been on all these things, abusing her body, and she just jumped over dead. And I don't know what made me not do it when everybody else was. And so that's a mystery to me. I wonder if there's been any research about what makes a person tend to become addicted to things and another person doesn't. If it's something psychological or chemical or whatever. Have there been any studies like that?
I know you're making me think of one that I wish I had all the names of these, but there's so many, where they talked about different personalities. You might hear people say, well, I have an addictive personality. I've heard other people disprove that. So, but some are more sensitive than others. And, I'm sure you're familiar with empaths and that sort of stuff. So I don't know if that's true. I know trauma, there's, Permanente, Kaiser and Permanente, did a huge study that just came out this year. And I did it with my class. The more trauma you experience, the more chance of becoming an alcoholic. So,
interesting.
Yeah, you'll have to look at that for sure. And I know we're going to a break here, so.
One interesting thing that I found out, when I was working with Stan Groff and studying the perinatal phases, is that when a mother drinks at certain stages in the baby's development, the baby is, and if she receives a Demerol or a saddle block as the child is coming out.
Honey, we're on break. We're on break. We'll do this. Remember where you were. Demerol. Remember Demerol. See you in about 4 minutes.
I'm stuck in the birth canal.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take freedom!
The future is uncertain. I know this. Death is inevitable. I know this. But one thing is certain. As free men, it is our right to live unencumbered and in peace. And those times are quickly drawing to an end. And in these times, peace is certainly an illusion. And as the chains grow tighter, our ability to slip those chains increase incrementally with every passing moment. Inaction is no longer an option. It's time to raise our voices like a cacophony of thunder and lightning and tell the masters no more. And this is Nighthawk, and I say, for myself, no more. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, because the freedom is slipping away.
Hello, my name is Mr. Rowe. I am the host of Reality Extraction, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I utilize logic, intellect, and magic to methodically atomize, vivisect, analyze, examine, study, scrutinize, and extract an essence of reality from a fog of illusion and confusion. You can find me on Studio B every Thursday, 1700 hours Pacific Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic taboo, no subject too strange. I strive to take a neutral standpoint during the dissection of the topic at hand. That's Reality Extraction with Mr. Rowe on Revolution Radio.
Anarcho-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look. It's just a flesh wound. I don't believe I'm
such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
download it to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Stargate to the Cosmos. And I'm your host, Jennifer Lesson, with Dr. Sasha Alex Lesson, our producer, Deborah DeFranco, and our guest is Suzanne Laura Thistle. And before we get back to our show, I wanted to remind everybody to please go up to the donation button on revolution.radio. And up at the top on the left, there's a link where you can, a tab I think it is, where you can donate. You make your one-time donation. And in the middle is the Patreon donation. And we do thank you very much for your donations. And so we're going to get back to our show. Dr. Lesson, you were saying Demerol. Do you want to pick up where you were?
We were talking about the effects of alcohol in a mother, particularly during the time that the child is developing at certain stages, directly affects the physical development of the child. But one of the startling effects that we found from our studies, with Stan Groff and other people, is that during the actual delivery of Demerol or Saddleback was given to the baby, a child and mother are during the matrix of labor are working together. They're both pushing in the same direction. When the Demerol hits, or the saddle block, the baby and the mother lose consciousness and they don't push together. So this person there's a tendency for them to strive and work hard and cooperate, and then just when they're almost succeeding, just like when the baby's almost being delivered, they give up. And so the surprising finding was that these people have a greater tendency to alcoholism and just giving up, and it's reliving the Demerol thing. And with Stan, when we regress people, we'd actually regress them to this third perinatal matrix, as it's called. And when they experience what happened when the mom just quit and their body just quit, and that whole feeling, it was a way to break through their lifelong alcoholism. And so that's, I thought I'd just put that out there as something to think about. And the other thing I really wanted, well, we've got our expert here, is I want to know how the current administration and the Republicans cut back on social services and help with programs such as those that assist our neediest people. What in the world is happening to our social net and to the people that you work with, and what can we do about it?
Go ahead, Susan.
That's a good question. I think that, I hate to say this, but I think our system the folks who really need help. Another reason for writing Chem-Free Sobriety, I just couldn't see what they need they were getting. I think folks who... Do I say this? Where is this being broadcast?
All over the world, but go ahead.
All right.
Go for it.
This is our chance to tell our truth and just let it rip. You are wise, you are respected, and we're listening to you.
Some people are better off sick, right? You can't make money if you don't have sick people. I guess that's what I want to say. And
oh yeah.
That's why my goal is to sell at least 1 million copies of Chem-Free Sobriety, because 5% of all net sales go directly to these folks that need it. And like I was starting to say earlier, I was dropping off some books for some folks who are brand new in sobriety. I've given away, I don't even know how many, lots and lots of books. The 101 folks in the book, all bought, well, I don't know how many bought it, but, they're buying it themselves. They donated their time to make sure that these folks get heard and I think, get their needs met. So, one of the things I did recently is, put together a care package. There's a small, sober living place in our area and, put a bunch of stuff in the packets for them as well as a book, and delivered them to them. And that warms my heart. I love doing that, but I don't know if we're ever going to see it. I guess that's the answer to the question you asked, Sasha, because, again, if they're not sick, people don't make money.
Well, that's the problem. There's no incentive for cures. There's no incentives.
Yeah.
Because you can't monetize a cure. You know, it's kind of like pay it once, and you need those repeat customers.
Right. And what they need is they need to be able to. My husband donated some money to the place I was last at for dental, and we specifically said we wanted it to go for client dental work and, I forget what else we said, vision. But these are things, the wraparound care stuff, you know, they need food, they need cars. I mean, if you think about it, right, money is the key. A lot,
right.
You know, I have been dealing with nonprofits for a long time. Now private, that's a whole nother ball of wax. You know, a lot of the folks who have the money that can eat right and, you know, go to the gym and buy, you know, have a house and have a car and all of that stuff. What they're needing is the support and the behavior and thought change and, but the other folks, it's so much harder because they don't have food, they don't have cars, they're stripped, a lot of them with severe trauma. I've thought, I talked to this, one guy, multi-millionaire one time. We were conversing back and forth quite a bit and I think he's doing some work right now with sober living, putting buildings together for them. But, I said, well, what would happen if we took somebody, I'd love to do this myself if I get enough money. I would love to do this. I know there's a movie out there too, and I forget the name of it, but it's similar to this. Take somebody who's destitute, sleeping under the bridge. Some of them are there for a reason, but not for a reason because they want to, but those that don't want to, and that's where they wind up, right? Take them. Buy them a house, even if it's a tiny house, whatever. Put them, or let them live in it for free for a while. Give them a car, give them money, as long as they follow a few steps, don't drink, go to support meetings, and ask people for help and stay close to a bunch of people in sobriety. Build a support network that is all about people in sobriety, right? And
that's a wonderful prescription. Absolutely. If people did more of what you're just saying, the world would change right away. I love it.
Just at least one. And even if we could, if this is going to 170 countries, hear this. If each person just took anybody that makes over, let's say, 200,000 a year, anybody that makes over 200,000 a year, I challenge you to go out and just do that for one person. Make one person well off and healthy. If we could all do that, right, we'll have a lot healthier people and people with substance use disorders. Let me put that in there. So we're following the same path here. I know there's other people that need help too, but let's start with people with substance use disorders and help them get well, you know?
Yeah. The other thing though is, you know, when we really systematically look at a place where only companies that sell so they make a profit for their leaders and their shareholders, and they don't care much about the community, and the cost of drugs is inflated and determined by companies, and doctors work as their agents and are rewarded by pushing, especially the opiates and things like that. It's obvious that it is the capitalist system which makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. Yeah. It's socialism for the very rich and very harsh capitalism for the people at the bottom. And it's a system that sucks. It's not governance which is about for the people. It's governance for the people that are governing.
You know, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned this. I'd like to have it done on myself, but if you think about it, psychiatrists, and don't get me wrong, I've worked with many, I've hired many that are just wonderful folks. But Dr. Amen, I don't know if you're familiar with him, if you like him or not, but he has some clinics here in the United States that they do a PET scan before they prescribe anything. And he said, you know, where else can you go? I mean, if you had, most of the time, if you had like something wrong with one of your bones or one of your organs, they're going to look at it before they prescribe something for it, right? Well, psychiatrists don't, they guess. So they give you medication and, you know, they start, and that's what I was thinking is, why don't we do that before we prescribe an opiate for what they're calling a brain disease? I think that if we did, of course, insurance isn't going to cover it because it's too expensive, right? I mean, they'll cover it for other things if you needed a PET scan for other things, or if you needed a MRI or something for any thing.
Universal health insurance. You need universal health coverage for every human being, for heaven's sakes. It's so obvious.
Yes, absolutely.
Deborah, did you have any part two? I know I cut you off. I apologize, but what more did you want to say? I just want to discuss.
No,
go ahead.
So when she was talking about her chemical-free sobriety book, you know, my question was, what are the top 3 steps a person should take who would want to attempt a chemical-free sobriety?
That's great. And, you know, a lot of the folks in this book found that a spiritual path was one of the first things that they did. Many people just asked God for help. That's the first step that they've had to take. And found miraculously that the next steps were, well, first put down the drink of the drug. And know that people can and do get and stay sober without medication or other drugs. And it is possible and there is hope. But reaching out and asking somebody for help, everybody's different on how their steps would happen. But bringing in a spiritual power, I think, is the very first thing, is just to ask for help, whether it be Buddha or Christ or whatever it is that you believe in. Unfortunately, I think in our society today, we've gone so far from that. We've gone so far from that, and we need to get back to realizing that this isn't about just us. There's much more than just us. And connecting to support. So I don't know if that answers your question, and I'm vague in a way because I know that a spiritual connection is extremely important and probably the very first step. Realizing that you can't do it alone. Most people need more than just putting down the drink. Most people need to work on the underlying issues, but if we look at the first step is not working on those underlying issues right off the bat, especially by yourself,
Right.
Yeah, getting help with that.
One of the common denominators that I've heard from people who successfully kicked alcohol was getting a good sponsor was extraordinarily important. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, and that's what I said about asking for help. But some folks may use a pastor, a minister. Some folks may use a trusted friend or an older person or somebody in recovery. They don't necessarily call them a sponsor, but if you're working the 12 steps, you should have a sponsor. I mean, that's just the way it is laid out in the 12 steps. And the way it is written in one of the books that go along with 12-step sobriety is, really working with a sponsor to go through all of those 12 steps. And some people will call that sponsor every day, sometimes 2 or 3, 4 times a day. We'll wind up with them. And I know I did. I was with my sponsor all the time because I absolutely had no idea how to live. I mean, I had spent my teen years using, abusing alcohol and other drugs. And I missed out on how do you live life. And so I needed somebody to help me with that, that and therapy. I think some folks are going to really need therapy, especially if there's trauma. Trauma, sponsors aren't qualified to deal with trauma, deep trauma. Some trauma can get, you can get through, but some deep trauma, some folks hold on to stuff that they've never shared. And I'm sure that we're only as sick, sick as our secrets. And, what's that? Sick secrets keep us sick. So getting rid of those secrets and finding out that many people have the same ones and still stay sober and still don't drink or do drugs and don't need to take an addictive chemical to manage it. Some folks may need something.
It's funny you say that because one of the things I've observed in a lot of dysfunctional families is they have a lot of secrets, right? They don't talk openly and they can't put all their cards on the table. And I've always said, secrets create monsters, right? If you don't get them out on the table, they manifest into something much more uglier.
Correct. And one of the, some of the stuff that people learn, I used to do group therapy and we would just work on some of the stuff the surface stuff, but really working on the deep stuff, getting, because most of, I'm kind of all over the place here, but in group therapy, it's good because you're hearing from other folks who have gone through similar things. And if you're in a support group, you're going to hear things not as deep, though, and that's not the place to really share deep trauma. Really, that belongs in the hands of a therapist. If you're trusting of that or talking with a close friend who can help you find somebody that really is able to talk through some of the trauma, but some of that stuff, the 12 steps, I mean, a lot of what I was doing with clients in group therapy and in individual care are in these 12 steps. And I have to believe that the folks, Carl Jung and the other folks that were involved in setting up the 12 steps and 12 traditions of AA, which has flourished all over, knew what they were doing, because I remember a girl in group therapy one time saying she opened up her DBT book and she said, "Hey, this is AA." And I'm like, "No, that's DBT, but yeah, it does seem a lot like that," So, but yeah, the secrets, I think, it's always amazed me that the stuff that you keep secret, and because you're keeping it a secret, you're exhibiting symptoms, right? Your symptoms are coming out of you because you haven't worked on it. So say somebody was raped, right? The person who did the rape, I know they're experiencing some things, but the person who was raped, I remember one lady who said to me, "I've never told anybody that. It's been 15 years. I never told anybody." And I thought, my God, she had to carry that for 15 years by herself, and the guy who did it, who knows if he's feeling anything, So get rid of it. People are raped, people are beat, people are poisoned, people are, all of this stuff. It's just stuff. It needs to get out of you so that you can live a free life. And I feel like I'm going on and on again.
No, it's actually a great example.
Sasha or Deborah, whoever wants to take it. Go ahead.
Let Sasha.
I find it somewhat useful to balance yourself between disclosure and privacy, and to evaluate the situation you're in, and not to slavishly blab whatever's going on with you. You have a right to privacy. And I think that what's most important is that you have no secrets from yourself. And the basic meditative practice you can engage in is to look at yourself objectively. That's your witness. That is the key to your spirituality. But I think it's foolish to slavishly rap out loud everything that you think, regardless of time and place and things like that. You got to find your balance rather than cut off any part of you. Every part has something to contribute if you find out what that part really needs that's driving its wants. That's my opinion. Anyhow.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. You trust people with a lip to see how far it goes. But also, yeah, I like that, trusting yourself, believing in yourself. Yeah, it's good stuff.
So, before we got on the air, we were talking about, how I was in the hospital, and every, time the cart came around with your medication, they were pushing, oxycodone and things like that. And I said no, because I was aware, but I saw them getting these young, 18, 19, early 20s, women, starting their addiction. Is this something that's really prevalent everywhere, or is that just my hospital?
I hope you get a chance to take a look at the information I sent. It's at the end of the interview questions that I sent you. But
okay.
The pharmaceutical companies. Now, I want to say this, that I don't think all pharmaceutical companies are bad. I mean, they've given us, I'm afraid to go to the hospital now if I speak poorly. they'll say, "Oh, there she is." But some pharmaceutical companies, my husband was his investor guy who said, we were on a conference call with him, and Phil was trying to think about what he should, where he should move money to. And the guy told him this pharmaceutical company. And when I heard it, I felt sick to my stomach. I'm like, oh my God, you're not going to put it in there. And he listened to me, which was really good. He was going to make lots of money with that pharmaceutical company, but it would be at the expense of people dying, because I know that pharmaceutical company is paying Congress to say and do what they want them to do so that they'll distribute what they want to distribute. And 60 Minutes just came out with, and I'm going to say within the past month, Bill Whitaker, if you haven't watched it, it's a great documentary to watch. Or it's about a guy who worked for a fentanyl company, and the fentanyl companies pretty much said, we want you to go out there and we want you to sell as much as you can, these fentanyl lollipops. We want you to sell as much as you can, pretty much. It doesn't matter what it takes, get it done. And, if you have to pay $100,000 for a doc to go down to the Caribbean and do a talk, we know we'll make tons of money if you get people to take this, fentanyl lollipop, and we know they'll, pretty much they know they'll become addicted. So that's more customers, right? So the more addictive medication we can get out there, the more customers we can get addicted, the more we're going to make money. And, there's no money in Chem-Free Sobriety, right? So, but it really is the gold standard. It is the gold standard. There's right now, medication-assisted treatment is being sold as the gold standard of care. Chem-Free Sobriety really is the gold standard of care. If you don't,
what you're talking about is murder. These people are understand that they're murdering people by withholding this information. This
right.
is a criminal conspiracy. This is murder.
Yeah, it is. It is. You got to watch 60 Minutes. They also, if you look at 60 Minutes, did also another documentary on. And it was Bill Whitaker again. So I sent Bill my book. I hope he reads it, because he's on the same path. He's like, what the heck is going on? So he interviewed the top DEA guy down in Washington after the head of the DEA left Washington. He was demoted and then he finally left. But he was about ready to arrest. He saw what was happening in Virginia. There were like 200 people in this community. And I'm saying 200 because that's the number that's coming to my head, but the balance you'll get, it's the same kind of balance, or unbalanced, unequal. 200 people in this community, and they were getting 2 million OxyContin pills delivered there. I don't know whether it was a month, but still, 2 million. And so he had evidence. He knew that these people were doing this, and he tried to tell the higher ups, and they weren't listening to him. And they pretty much kept him from prosecuting. So he left, and now he is involved in the lawsuits. I guess this is what I heard. He's involved in the lawsuits on prosecuting the folks who were doing this. Sackler family, I don't know if you've heard them, but they're the ones who developed OxyContin. They also have another name, and I don't know the name off the top of my head, but they're now selling Narcan over in Europe somewhere under a different name. So they knew people would get addicted, and they knew there needed to be treatment, and it's almost like they don't even care how much it cost for paying off lawsuits and going bankrupt here because they're going to make money over there. Yeah, Purdue Pharma, that's who they are. That's the Sackler family. Yeah. It's crazy.
A little side issue is corporation can go bankrupt, but it's easy for them to restructure. But if a homeowner goes bankrupt, they lose their home.
Yeah. Or what's happened is they've lost their children's lives or their parents' lives. I remember near the end of my time at the last place I worked at. I was asked to come and speak to, I was asked to have somebody come and speak, but I couldn't find anybody, so I just did it myself, at this community center. And, all kids, in their teens and, in Wolfboro, New Hampshire. I'm going to say that because there's a reason for that. And I'm sitting there. It turned into group therapy, it felt like, because they just wanted to know what I did and what's a LADAC do, a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. And so I shared what we do and stuff. And then they started talking about themselves. And in this very small group, in this very small town in New Hampshire, I had one person who said, my father made me go down in the basement when he was talking to the police. Another person, both his parents died of an overdose. Another person watched somebody get shot or something like that. Her mother shot her girlfriend or something like that. And I'm just sitting there going, wow, we've only got like 15 kids here, and this is what I'm hearing in this small little sort of well-to-do town. And it's scary. It's scary what's going on. Increase in children born neonatal, drug exposed, 600% increase in a very short period of time. And what's going to happen with these kids? I can't imagine. I know we're dealing with a lot of them now. They're 18 years old, 19 years old now, and there'll be more to come because, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's a huge problem because, in point of fact, a mother that's drinking while she's pregnant or smoking cigarettes heavily is harming another human being. And it's like you've got to be able to stop people from smoking tobacco while they're pregnant, and yet no one even addresses that I know of.
No, and they're giving them medication too, Subutex or methadone. And I think they might have started giving them Suboxone too. I know that some were. And I remember being at a Harvard training, an addiction training one time. And this was probably, 10 years ago. And I remember this nurse getting up there to speak. And she said, you don't have to give them an opiate. Part of why they do that is they don't want the baby to go through withdrawals inside the womb. I get that. I'm hoping that we can have some breakthrough type of therapy that we don't have to give these babies opiates throughout their pregnancy, throughout the time in the womb, because, I don't remember what this woman said was what she was doing or proposing. I know there's a doctor there was a report, I think it was, in the fall maybe, a doctor who was helping women get off opiates while they were pregnant. And it was considered, not sketchy, but, they were kind of condemning him because he was doing it. And I was thinking, wow, I should save all this stuff. I should start saving all of these articles, but, it can be done, and unfortunately, it's not. The gold standard is opiates for moms, opiates for anybody that's got an opiate problem. You're going to get an opiate for the treatment, and I hope people get to read this book, Chem-Free Sobriety, because you don't have to take medication. You do not have to take a medication to get and stay sober. And you can live a chemical-free life and live a happy life and have a mind that can think and in a positive and productive way and feelings, thoughts, emotions can be managed. And I don't know. I just it boggles me. It boggles me, and that again, part of the passion and the drive to get this out here. Get this out to the world so that they know there's another way. And
it's a directory of like different parts of the world where you would go to find a sponsor to get help.
A sponsor. So in the back of the book, there's resources, and you can call any of those folks, and they'll connect you to somebody. And that's why I put it there. I put AA, NA, Smart Recovery, Refuge Recovery, Celebrate Recovery. They're all in there. There's numbers. There's online, how to connect online, so that they. I know with AA and NA, if you call their number, they'll connect you. Usually there's a district office, a state office, not a district office, a state office where they have phone numbers of people who, if you're struggling, you can call. So I would say to anybody that's out there struggling right now to pick up the phone and make a call. All of these AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Celebrate Recovery, Smart Recovery, Refuge Recovery is new. And I can't say too much about that. I just know that people like it. But those agencies are all online, and you can just plug that in and go there and get a phone number to call. And again, if you buy Chem-Free Sobriety, the book online, there's resources in the back of that book to use if you need them.
Suzanne, what I realize is that we get so involved in comfortable with our own words. Could you tell us what are the steps? What are the AA's steps? Because I think just saying their names will set a paradigm going in people's heads, and many people don't know what the 10 steps are. I don't even remember whether there's 10 or 12.
The 12 steps. Make me do that off the top of my head. Okay, so step 1 is believing that you're powerless over the alcohol or the drug. So not meaning that I can't not do it. I cannot do it, but what happens when somebody picks up their first drink or their first drug, it starts a compulsion that's overwhelming, and the best thing to do is just stay away from that first drink. So admitting that you're powerless over the compulsion that happens, because it's like, think about it with sugar. You talked about sugar. I could go down a whole nother rabbit hole with that, but I just did a lot of research on that for my class last semester, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Anyways, when you eat something sugar, or if you see something that's something you really like chocolate, there's for some folks it sets off this process, which is interesting to hear you, Janet, and Deb talk about not ever wanting to be out of control. I was married to, my ex-husband was like that. He never would have more than 1 or 2 drinks usually. So I could never get that. Actually, when we were in Hawaii, when we went to Maui, we went to this restaurant, and he had this blue lagoon or blue, I don't know, it was a blue drink, and he had 1, and that was it. And then he had coffee, and I got pissed off. I'm like, aren't you gonna, get drunk or something? I was sober, but I thought you should get drunk. Anyways, so just having 1 drink is not okay, or 1 drug. It starts off that compulsion. So admitting we were powerless over alcohol and that our life had become unmanageable. Our lives were unmanageable. 2, made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood Him. And that can be whatever your higher power is. And
somebody
no, I'm sorry.
Atheist, or what if someone doesn't have concept of a higher being.
Came to believe in a power greater than ourselves. And 3 was turning your will in your life. But what about atheism? And they talk about atheism a little bit. And many people stay sober that are atheists and stay sober for a long, long time. I think in the book it talks a little bit about to try this way. You know, if it works for you, fine. If it doesn't, that's fine too. But so 1 is admitting you're powerless. 2 is came to believe that a power greater than yourself could restore you to sanity. 3, turning your will and your life over to this care, this higher power. And 4 is where you start doing some of the work. You make a list of all the people you had harmed and you start doing an inventory. I'm not good at memory. And usually I'm in bed at like 8:00.
We got you past your bedtime. Sorry.
All right. That's okay.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Suzanne, just condensed time. Imagine that you've gone to bed, you're fully rested, and now you're waked up fresh and you're ready to go on with the list.
There you go. So 4 and 5 are house cleaning, working on yourself, looking at past hurts, resentments. They actually go into sexual stuff, where were you wrong? And then 5 is sharing it with somebody, and it can be, whoever. It can be your sponsor. It can be a mentor. It can be a priest or a pastor. And then 6 is kind of getting ready to have God remove all your defects of character. So, asking God to remove these defects of character. And 7, I'm so sorry. I totally forget. But 8 and 9. But 8 and 9 is making a list of people that you had harmed, and 9 is making those amends. And 10 is about, keeping a daily, when you go to bed at night, really thinking about your day and where did I go wrong? Do I need to promptly admit something that I did, instead of carrying it around? And so that's what that's about. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God as I understand him or her. And 12 is helping others to achieve sobriety. Wow, that was good. 7 is the only one. Remember, and I hope to God nobody's listening that knows me personally, because they'll probably be like, she should know that.
One thing that strikes me about that list is that the higher powers is seen as external to the person and not as integral to the internal personality, and that's an interesting way of looking at things. It's a what I would call a dichotomous view of existence.
Well, I think you'll find if you talk to people in recovery that it's more about God is in and outside of us, that it's not, what's interesting is I think the 11th step, continuing that process to develop more and more in my spiritual quest, which is wonderful for me because I've realized more and more how God is in me and outside of me. And, as my husband would say, God is everything,
Lovely. Yes. Good to hear that. And so, it's a really interesting thing because I have my friends. My second wife just hated churches and stuff like that, and they think it's evil, and they think it's like programs people to hate and so forth. And when I remember, I went to all my friends' churches and everything, and what I saw was a bunch of people that like to sing and enjoy each other's company in beautiful places. And so the reality is the reality, whatever people's beliefs are. And that's one really nice about the AA meetings. It doesn't matter what your beliefs are. There's a bunch of loving people that care and will listen to your story and empathize with you.
Right. Right. And accepting people for who they are and where they come from. And I'm being told, 7th step, rid yourself of character defects and replace them with practicing humility. Oh boy. To be more humble myself, I'll tell you. But I think the most wonderful people I know practice these 12 steps, or, I have some wonderful friends who are just, they're into, their religion and that's different religions, and they're just beautiful, honest, good people. And I love being around them. So, whatever life path people need to take to, but I think we get away from that spiritual part, and that is, part of being well, in my opinion, is to have a spiritual connection, to know that there's so much more, out there than we know, and that we have access to that there's an abundance of in life, and that, our cup is not half empty, and that, we can use a cup, or we can use, I just, every day I think that, I walk most every day, although it's been raining a lot in the past couple of days, but, and I just think, every pine needle is different. Every little grain of salt is different. How can we not believe that there is something way beyond us that is involved here, and that we're a part of that, and that we breathe out what the trees need, and the trees give us what we need. We're all connected. We're all connected somehow. And I love my life. I love this path I'm on, and wherever it takes me, it'll be great. I just know it. And I'm so grateful that I got to connect with you guys. I hope to meet you in person at some point.
Someday if we ever get out of COVID lockdown.
Yeah, we are really doing the same thing. If I may, I'd like to just sort of talk about, our creators, according to the ancient Sumerian stuff that I study. People came who settled and created our race to mine gold for them. But in any case, they were so uptight with their dominator attitudes and their constant competition that they liked to get drunk. They brought beer. They brought wine. They brought psychedelics. The problem was their society was so harsh and competitive that is part of the problem. And they had a rigid class system where people on top dominated people on the bottom, and men dominated women, and so they would like to party. They would have orgies. But if you couldn't handle it, like Inanna's husband Sargon, he just got to be a drunk and she couldn't take it anymore. And so they had problems with it, and they had a society that drove people to drink too. So it's part of our long-time heritage.
Right. I think we have a society that's like that now. There's actually there's a book called Real People, Real Recovery, two friends of mine who wrote that, and they talk about the dislocation theory, and one of them anyways talks a lot about what you're saying is, a lot of people are just, who do we believe anymore? I mean, we're hearing from the Democrats, it's this way. We're hearing from the Republicans, it's this way. And they're saying the Republicans wrong, and they're saying the Democrats are wrong. And I'm like, oh my gosh, who do we believe? We don't even know who to believe anymore. And I'm a sober mind. I've been sober a long time. And I think of these folks that are, they're so full of fear. They're so full of fear. And our, do you know alcohol rates went up 55% during COVID? And the folks that I've been talking to, have been telling me that there's new alcoholics, people who just became alcoholics, because they didn't realize that, if I drink during the day, every day, I might, eventually become an alcoholic. Or So, and overdose, folks, it was going up and up, and people were going into the emergency room. And then I just looked at the stats earlier, and they showed that it went down. And when I was listening on the news not too long ago, somebody on the news was saying, we think people don't want to come into the emergency room because of COVID, you know. And so,
Right.
We're living in a society that makes it really hard and chaotic and scary, and you know, alcohol raises dopamine in your brain. It makes you feel good. Drugs make you feel good. You know, it's temporary, but it makes you feel good, and especially when you don't know what's coming down the path and where we're going to be. Are we going to be okay? Is the world going to end? What's going to happen? You know, they haven't developed. A lot of these folks, what I was seeing was people that were sober a while were starting to go back out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, they haven't, you know, it takes a little time to develop, you know, to get yourself healthy. And like I said, that first 90 days is so crucial because, it's a time where you can, you know, let your body heal a little bit, get some good food in you, start drinking a lot of water, getting some exercise. But if you're just a couple of weeks sober, this kind of craziness is, with the whole political stuff and all of the racism stuff and you know, it just, it's been hard on people. So yeah.
Right.
That society can play a big role in whether or not people wind up drinking or using, you know. Oh.
Deborah, you told us 5 minutes to close. What would you like to say? Do you have something you want to ask, wrap?
You know, I have a son-in-law who has severe PTSD. He's a soldier in the military and has been deployed to a war zone 4 times. Has watched an extraordinary amount of death, had a very traumatic childhood, and he's struggling with alcoholism. And he was in this program right before COVID that ended early, and it was actually highly successful. And now he's fallen back. I've begged him to try and find a counselor or a support system. He needs a particular kind of counselor.
God.
Any recommendations of how to get him to seek the right type of help?
Oh, Deb, I'm so sorry. When you said your son-in-law, is it?
Yes. He's a soldier in the U.S. Army in Germany.
PTSD, yeah.
He's been to Afghanistan. He was in Iraq in the worst.
Uh-oh.
I think we're experiencing some difficulty with the internet.
And childhood trauma.
There it is.
And I know there's a lot of soldiers in his shoes. He's not alone.
Right.
And the Army, the only support they give him is they ask you, are you okay? Right? There's no required screenings when they come back or they come home. And I just feel like that career path for men who have those issues perpetuates the problem.
Right.
Any recommendations for soldiers in that situation, how or where to seek help?
Well, I know the VA does have a section for folks, and I don't know about where he is, but I know in New Hampshire they've decided to allow people outside of the VA to treat these folks. So there is a couple of folks who were in the services. One of them was I think he was a sergeant or something, and one was in the Navy, and I think one was in the Army. They're in the book, and they talk a little bit about their service, but their recovery happened outside of there. But I would check with the VA for sure right away and see what they have for services, depending on where he is. You know, it's going to be different depending on where he is, but he may be able to get services outside of there. But he has the right to get those services, and hopefully he'll get the help he needs. I'd buy him the book.
You know what? I'm going to buy him the book. And honestly, to tell you the truth, after listening to this, it's the next thing on my list to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do hope he gets help because, the hardest thing is the denial. I don't have a problem, but at least if you just, send him the book, have it sent to his house or whatever, he can't deny that he got it. I used to tell people to leave books around, like the AA books or whatever, leave them around at their house, So, yeah.
You know what? I give a book. I give everybody in my immediate family, my children and my grandchildren, I give them a book every Christmas, and I spend the year looking for the perfect book for each person. So that's going to be his Christmas present this year.
There you go. Absolutely. It's
Suzanne.
I'm sorry, we're done.
We're almost out of time. I don't know if we're done or not, but do you have, what's your website, or what's your book again? Just one more time. We have 1 minute before the music comes on. Take us on out.
Chem-Free Sobriety, 101 Trailblazers share wisdom, insight about their natural recovery from substance use disorders by Suzanne Laura Thistle, MAMLADC. Hoping that people buy it and realize that they can live a chem-free life, that no matter what, if you want to drink or you want to use drugs, you don't have to. Just know that. I guess that's the message that I want people to have.
Well, thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Much love and blessings. Aloha. Everybody say aloha.
Aloha.
1, 2, 3. Aloha.
Aloha. Goodbye. Ha.
Nice meeting you all.
Lovely meeting you.